Hi, this is Connie. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right.
Yep.
I'm not sure, Marco, how many people are we supposed to have on our call?
Let me check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10.
Great.
Um,
So we'll give it a couple more minutes.
Okay, we're gonna pretend do a call. Ooh, got a better option.
All right, let's see who's here. Looks like maybe we're all here.
we're just waiting on Jamie Miller.
Okay.
Okay. You
I can send him an email if you want to get started, Connie.
All right. Thanks, Marco. All right. My understanding is that we are to go through the recommendations that we talk about, feelings about them, what we think of them, suggestions, improvements, etc., etc. So, does anybody have a proposed? I mean, but you, I'm a paper person, but does anyone have one that they would like to start with to begin with? One of the solutions that's proposed. Go ahead. No one? Masood, didn't you submit one of the proposals?
Yes, I am unmute now.
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Yeah, I did submit it. And what I focused on, what I learned over many years after talking to many students, not just in Wisconsin, but also other states as well, is focusing more on the root cause of this debt. And I was looking at more two types of solution. For example, what can be done with the debt that they already have, short term. And number two is how should we avoid this debt in the future? And it will require some integrated approach to do that. In terms of the existing loan, I think we need to figure this out to make sure that we have the job opportunities for these people and their resume is strong. So we need to connect with employers, particularly in the manufacturing sector, whether it is a 2-year associate degree or a 4-year associate degree. And I think the resources are there. I hear that from CEOs all the time that, they're looking for people, we don't find qualified people. All the students that I talk with, they have no problem paying this loan that they have. The problem is they don't have the opportunity to pay it back. So one of my recommendation was that we need to connect those people. So I'm pretty sure there's a database of these people out there somewhere that we can reach out to figure this out where they're at and connect them. So something like that. And the second part was, to avoid this from happening, we need to work with these students all the way from high school to college, 2 year, 4 year, to guide them properly with creating a mentorship program within our state. A lot of people that I talk with, they're very interested in volunteering with different fields of specialization to become mentor, to make sure these students are guided properly. And my third point was, instead of just depending 100% on federal dollars all the time and others, I certainly believe that our state can create a public-private partnership through a nonprofit or something where the state can provide some money, but private donors can also provide some money. Now we can provide our interest-free loan or something through this and offer internship and arrange paid internship and manufacturing and other things like that, taking a comprehensive strategy to address those both long-term debt that they have and avoid that from happening in the future.
Does anybody have questions on this? I will say that as far as the partnerships go, that are partnering with businesses for specific industry things or things such as in McFarland where I live, they have a program where the students actually work at auto mechanics shop that's at the actual store, place of business as part of their education, and they get credit for that. And also, I think that the Certified Nursing Assistance Program is pretty active in a lot of schools, in a lot of high schools throughout the state, where people who are interested in going into medicine do actual work as certified nursing. They go into that program, so they go to classes. But they also get on the job training. So I think, especially at the high school level, that's a really good idea. I wonder if they must have that at colleges and universities around the state. Does anybody know if they do? I know some of the tech colleges do, actually.
Yeah, I think, some of them do, but I do get lots of phone calls from on manufacturing side that they're having difficulty and they're very interested in finding these students, even paid internship, on job training and those kinds of things. But I think going back to the level of high school to me is very critical because sometimes they don't know what those opportunities are. Having those kinds of even some industry people going to these high schools with us and early on, either junior or senior, to tell what those opportunities are. How is the environment in manufacturing high paying jobs and making a change? So there are lots of those opportunities out there from that perspective.
I actually like that proposal and including, the businesses going into high schools. And one thing that I would recommend to help with that would be to connect with the Administrators Association in the state, the Superintendents Association, and the people that represent the teachers unions. That because not it there's a lot of work that goes into that, and not everybody has the time. Especially when you're trying to, make sure that you're getting the students what they need. But when there's partnerships, it really helps, I think, getting school districts and specific schools to start moving in those directions.
Yeah. And some of these industry leaders that I talk with, they are even willing to offer tuition fee and work with these students, provide all the guidance and the mentoring that they need, and offer job when they graduate in exchange for some kind of understanding that they will work in these manufacturing facilities for a certain period of time. So there's a gap out there that we can fill in and connect the dots.
Oh, that's right. Representative Baldwin wrote that the CSAs do technical school to work programs. So I think it would be the CSAs are the education, uh, they're like area education things where they get the schools together uh, in specific areas so they can share ideas. That's a really good point. The other thing is that I think sometimes students believe that if they go into any of these kinds of apprenticeships, they might want to get a degree in something that um, doesn't include technical work, but working in some of these places does set people up for even going into management at some time. Doesn't mean that they're, anyway, it's a good idea. I like it a lot.
If one of the proposals I read through that I think would be interesting and important to discuss is the income share agreement. I think, Marco, did you draft that one?
I did.
So I know from my role at the Attorney General's office, one of the concerns that consumer protection lawyers and groups have about these income share agreements is that they aren't regulated the same way a loan typically is. So one of the things I think would be interesting, and I don't know whether it could be something you and I work on, Marco, is I know that other state legislators, such as Durbin down in Illinois, have put together sort of proposed legislation on how to regulate the income share agreements. So one of the pitfalls would be that schools can sort of take advantage of students by requiring long terms of payments, so 20 years of payments, 10% of income, and there's no cap. And so you might have only borrowed $40,000 from the school, or that's what you would have taken, or your tuition would have been through the school. But there's no cap on how much to pay back. So the real fear is not necessarily with the Purdue University, which is one of the leaders in it, but it's more these for-profit schools would not cap it, and a student may, have only borrowed $40,000, but end up paying back $100,000, $120,000, $130,000 because they end up being a high income earner with no cap. So I know that there is proposed legislation out there because I've done a short research project for my boss at DOJ, and I'd certainly love to work further on that proposal with anyone who's interested.
I like that idea a lot.
Okay,
Yeah, and I can reach out to you about that, Shannon.
great. I'll just put a note down that I'll reach out too, so we'll connect.
Thank you.
Can someone explain what destination, graduation, additional solution summary? Can someone explain? Does anyone on here understand what destination graduation is? I didn't read that paper.
I can explain it. It's a program that I believe is currently taking place in Florida, and the goal is to work with school counselors to make sure that it's a form of financial literacy as well as college planning. And the lead on that is currently writing a solution summary for us. So
Is
I
that
think what?
is Cheryl Rapp doing that?
Yeah, it's through Cheryl Rapp.
Okay. The one thing I see as a little bit difficult in that situation is that there's high school all counselors in schools are totally overwhelmed with so much already. But I think more financial literacy would be good. Even starting at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So someone must have something else they want to talk about.
So along those lines, on the education in the high schools, I know my mother-in-law is on the school board up in Rhinelander, and she told me that, and I believe it's through their home ec or whatever the equivalent of home ec is, that they have a one day where the students are required to do a financial literacy program every year, and I believe it's the junior class, but it could be the senior class, where they are given a job, a salary, and then certain expenses, and it's their job to figure out how they're going to make ends meet with what they're given. She said that there's no real discussion about student loans in that curriculum, but that it's something she certainly plans to bring up the next time. I am sure she would love to discuss with anyone who's interested how Rhinelander does it. And she sounded like she thinks that the teacher in Rhinelander who runs the program would be more than willing to discuss with anyone who'd be interested in how they do it. So I'd throw that out there. That's something I would certainly feel comfortable working with others on, or working on my own on, to figure out how it is that could be implemented statewide. I know that's a big ask to implement it statewide, but maybe if we had an idea of how much time and planning and resources it takes to do a class like that, it would allow us to make a decision as to whether that's something we can reasonably expect of schools.
That makes sense.
Okay, I can.
And Shannon, I think the person I would actually advise you to reach Carol Rapp, because she does at DFI, because she does financial literacy. That's her main job. So
Great.
that would be great.
You said she's at DFI?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Shannon, when I reach out to you, I can CC Cheryl on that email.
Great.
That'll be. Thank you, Marco.
Thanks.
Does anyone want to talk about what promoting public-private refinancing partnerships would look like? Might not be the one that, might not be our. Go ahead, Masood. That would be great.
Yeah, before I go to that, I just want to make one point that Shannon was talking about is when I was talking about the manufacturing leaders going to high school, educating them with the opportunity, a part of that could be just one day when some of these high school students who are interested in getting a high paying job could actually visit these facilities. One day it's all covered by the school. So it's a paid thing, and they can just go and visit so they can see with their own eyes what they're getting into. And that changes a lot of the students' mind in a real world situation, and that helps a lot. Public-private partnership, the way I described in my recommendation, is just to either find a 501c3 nonprofit organization that either already exists or create one, where people that I talk with, they're very willing to donate significant amount of tax deductible for loan purposes. They are willing to do that. I think if the state can contribute some matching funds or create some incentives for these guys in addition to tax, then I think it's really going to be a self-sustaining program. Because if we tie that with mentoring and line up with internship, line up with jobs ahead of everything, then I think the graduation rate is going to increase significantly. And then they're going to get high paying jobs, and then they can use that to pay that money back to that nonprofit. And then you self sustain the funding opportunity. So that was just the one of the ideas that I proposed.
That's great. Representative Ballwick, do you want to talk about the manufacturer you know that does the tours and works with students?
Right, so can you hear me okay, Connie?
Yes.
All right, so I just wanted to mention that there are manufacturers that are doing that kind of thing. I had the opportunity, actually it was a couple of years ago already, that Alliance Manufacturing in Ripon actually organized with a school that the teachers from I think it was in the high school, who taught uh, basically sophomores, they had a special tour set up for teachers, and then followed that up a couple weeks later for students in a particular class. And the whole idea was to engage the teachers and see what kind of jobs were available in their local manufacturing. Everything from working on the line to marketing and accounting and engineering and everything else. So the idea is that, yes, there are ways and examples that manufacturers can engage their local schools if the schools are interested in making that part of the curriculum. And I mentioned before, we have in our local CISA, we have a very engaged individual who sets up these school to work programs, and it's like pulling teeth trying to get people engaged in that, because it is it takes some scheduling, and obviously individual businesses have to spend time to be able to mentor these young people, because they are not they're learning. They're in many different areas. They're not all productive, and you're paying them and so on. But I know it can be a really successful program, but you need individuals that are interested in moving forward in those programs.
Good point. Thank you. What if we switch to private loan protections, which is number 9 on the consumer protection list? I mean, do you think there would be, I think it would be great to have some regulation over private loans, and not only that, but the for-profit schools. Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
Well, Connie, if I could, I know Seth was talking a lot about MSERA, and that is something that we joined that compact, I think, in the 2015 session. It was I led the Assembly bill, and Senator Harsdorf at the time led the Senate side of the bill. And I know that this is something that came out of the Midwest Higher Education Compact that I'm a commissioner of, and I hadn't heard any questions regarding lack of consumer protection when you join the compact. So I'm going to share that with some of the folks over there and see if we can sort out any particulars that they've noticed that they're continuing to work on through the compact.
I actually sent an email to Dr. Ralph Wagenke, because I know he serves also, and said, this is probably something that needs to be discussed, because that kind of confused me too.
Right, yeah, he is another commissioner, correct. I will do that also.
Yep. I know. Oh, go ahead. I know that one of the Um, one of the solutions I saw on the paper that I printed out was the tool that can be used for students who already have loans. The state entering into a partnership with what's it called? It's not Avid, but I could
Savvy.
Savvy. I'm pretty familiar with that tool, and I know that it has helped a lot of people understand their loans and figure out how to deal with them. So that is something I think that we should look into more closely.
One of the things I'm wondering how the group feels about is, I think that there's important for there to be literacy education at the high school level. I don't know who is in the group. I had talked about this previously in a different session. When I went to an admitted students weekend in Indiana, I didn't end up going to Indiana Law School, but one of the things that really hit home for me that I am curious as to whether this group thinks it's something we can implement is that at that admitted students weekend, they had a 2.5 hour session that talked about student loans and their impact. So I don't remember who led it. It was a professor. I don't think it was a professor specific to the law school, but at any rate, the professor talked about average debt that students take out both in-state and out-of-state, and then built upon that to show what's the average earning that a lawyer in Indiana makes. And then took that out and said, these are the average expenses. Of course, it has to be averages, but these are the average expenses that a practicing lawyer has. So mortgages, childcare, groceries, electrical, yada yada yada, and really laid it out in very great detail to me, or I believed it was great detail of what a student loan payment looks like. Which to me was so important because I had looked at going to Indiana or Wisconsin, and when they said, plan on borrowing $60,000 a year, and this is what it's going to look like, and I went, $180,000 or pay in-state for Wisconsin. The decision was easy for me, right? But I don't know if that decision would have been so easy for me if someone had not have clearly laid it out. That is something I think would be super important for colleges to start doing. And I know that that's a big ask of colleges to, educate everyone who's taking out loans. But I also think it might be one of the most important things that can be done for students who are borrowing money. Because I don't know that students, you have the program in high school, and I get that. But until a student is asked to sign the dotted line borrowing the money, I don't know that a student knows exactly how serious it is to take out this kind of debt. I think that it affects things like, where are you going to live? We've got undergraduates living in apartments that cost more than a mortgage payment. Would that student live in that housing or alternative housing if they knew that living in that apartment for 4 years meant that they couldn't afford to buy a home after they graduate? So that is something I feel very passionate about. And I'm just wondering if that's something that we think this group could, I'd be happy to lead it. I don't want to bite off more than I can chew, joining 3 groups, but if there's a lot of interest from this group, it's something that I would be more than happy to lead a group to figure out what it is we could do to get that literacy to college students at the time and before they borrow the money.
I yeah, one of the places that could happen is at student orientation,
Right.
because I think something that would be important to uh, point out to kids is that, if you've been offered financial aid and you don't need all of it, and you take out this extra $3,000, that probably in the long run is going to cost you $9,000. I mean, So that, and Kimani just mentioned that they, it is required that they do instruct students about that. You know, yeah, and the students aren't retaining the information. The college students, yes, that's what they're thinking about. It's
Yeah, I understand
really
that.
well to use, so.
Yeah, I understand that they're required to do that through this, but I don't know that the message is coming across. And again, maybe the answer is, well, that's on the students and they need to take the loan counseling they're offered more seriously. Or I guess I would challenge this group to say, is it the university's responsibility? The way that I look at it is, Title IX funds come in through the Higher Education Act and the school is paid. And at the end of the day, if the students are taking out more than they can afford to pay back and defaulting, at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers that are assuming that responsibility or that bill. And so I guess I would challenge us to say, is there more that can be done? There's this minimum requirement on the studentloans.gov, but is there more that we as the institution that's taking the money can do, or not we as the institution, but the institutions themselves, that we can push those institutions to do to really put forward some education that's not just, on the internet, something that's in person, mandatory, that would make a real effect. And if the answer is no, I certainly understand that. But that would be something I'd be interested in exploring.
Shannon, this is Diane, and I love this issue. Full disclosure, I have 3 kids. One's going for his PhD at St. Louis, but he did his undergrad and master's at UW Milwaukee. And then my another one that started at Eau Claire, now at La Crosse, and then my youngest one is hopefully going to be in Oshkosh, moving to a dorm if it's open. We'll see what happens this fall. But there's definitely room. Whenever I go to these parent-student orientations, and it's like the parents and the students all get together, and it's UW Eau Claire or UW La Crosse, there's time. Not 2.5 hours, but if they could do something within a half an hour and just say, because gosh knows we all have to eat at the halls. We all, they have us on the whole tour. There's time to do something like this that I think would be really valuable for the parents as well. And certainly I did hear from parents on a few weeks ago talking about student loan debt and, having their children take out more student loan than they were taking out debt to help their kids. I think that would be really helpful. And also to know what programs, because they're so different at every single university, and the help and the work programs that they could also apply for. But I think that would be a really good use of time at these parent, daughter and son things that they go to.
I agree.
Hi, I'd like to comment on these points too. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, good. So I think I work at a high school here in Milwaukee, so it's definitely an important issue. Though, I think Shannon, your story was great. The one challenge is, if I'm an undergrad and I'm going into like a liberal arts school, there's less specific information, right, than if I'm going into a law degree program. But it's still a good idea nonetheless. I think at the high school level, so I was trying to think of what's a way from DPI that could hit all of the schools, right? We have so many different kinds of schools in Wisconsin. And I think one, so I'm a private school, where I work at a private school and we participate in the choice program, which essentially almost every private high school in Milwaukee does to some extent. And we have to do trainings every year. If you're an administrator, you have to take quizzes. So that could be a way, not for students, but for counselors or for staff members who work in the school. Nothing too crazy, but to say, hey, we're rolling out this new program. We can call it you're a certified this or that or whatever, but to make sure that the adults in the building have that knowledge first to say, I understand like some of the things that I'm learning here, but to make sure that other people in schools, whether it's public, charter schools sponsored by other institutions or private schools that participate in choice, have that knowledge too, or something that's on a recurring basis to say, okay, I've taken this quiz every year and we can ask more people to take it. So that's a real base level idea or recommendation, but that's a way that DPI could track to say, hey, here's the number of schools that have participated in this, or a number of, here's the completion rate that we have from schools, so we know that counselors are thinking about it. So just a thought there.
Like,
One of the things I would mention, like going back to what Shannon was talking about, if we can do this a little bit more in a coordinated way. For example, I don't know whether in our state, if a one-stop shop actually exists. So in other words, that all these students who are accepted, for example, if their information is sent back to a one-stop shop, then they can provide all the information that they need about whether it is housing, opportunities, and what. And if that can also be combined with some educational program that governor is creating in each of our state agencies more about inclusivity and diversity, that office can also play into that, educating those who are coming from outside early on that what state actually, what we stand for in our state as a part of that, so they have a better understanding before they come in our state. The other thing I should mention at this point is that I don't know that our state is actively engaged in organizing maybe some kind of yearly job fair in a well coordinated way. If we can do something like that on a yearly basis, that would help a lot to our students. I just want to throw that out.
So I would actually like to agree quickly on a point with what Masood just said. So for our UW Milwaukee's homepage, we have a page that is actually called One Stop, and it is something that we refer to students where they can do a quick one stop and shop to go when it comes to graduation, grades, financial aid, and they can go and quickly receive the information that they need. The only point that it comes through from our university is that they don't know where it is, so it just takes simple guidance for them to get there. And we routinely, every quarter, work on that page and get it as up to date as possible. I would like to agree, absolutely everything Shannon you said, I agree, and Diane as well. I think at some point though, it comes down to even everything that we want to streamline and give guidance to students, it ultimately comes down to their choices and their own accountability. I see it as more everything that we provide for them as efficient, as coordinated, as organized as possible. And then it's really going to come down to students for their own held accountability and how they're going to take that information and what they're going to do with it. To quickly go back to kind of what Shannon was saying. So for my campus, what I'm doing, working with my student orientation office and my financial aid office, where I already work, I'm trying to get a coordinate event where through the student orientation office, I'm trying to get a financial aid prep day, or however we decide to name it, I'm not entirely sure, where students and parents come in and it's kind of like a maybe 45-minute to an hour kind of in-depth review of the students that have already been accepted to campus, what you are expected to go through the financial aid process. Aside from the other, academia world, the other half is how your expenses are going to be determined. Another thing I'm working with on my financial aid office is the surrounding high schools in the areas, especially ones that have like business educators, business teachers. They seem to do a really great job in handling with their PowerPoints and slides. When someone mentioned this, the breakdown of what it takes to take out loans. How is that going to affect you in the long run? How much debt you're going to accrue, your interest rates, how this might impact you buying a home. Now, I know there are probably going to be many 18, 19, and 20 years old where it might kind of go over their head. But I believe with parent facilitation and having that bond together with them to go through this together, students might not feel at such a young age that they're feeling overwhelmed, but also feeling that guidance that, hey, I know you're young now, but there are going to be future repercussions if the necessary or the right steps aren't being taken now. So those are just some of my points to give out for an agreement and the steps that my campus and I are taking currently.
That sounds interesting. The one that, not about your presentation, but I think that the students who are most disadvantaged are the ones whose, their first generation going to college or whatever, but whose parents don't either have the time or the ability to really help them understand the process of borrowing and lending and money, and because they have never had any. So I think we need to be sure that when we're talking about kids and their parents, that's not always a not always helpful for parents to talk about parents. And I think the students that we really need to look at is are those who need the most information and are going to have the hardest time understanding it. But I think the program is great, and I think it's great that you guys are doing that. I'm going to follow up with you later to hear more about that.
Thank you, Connie. And as a first generation student myself, I completely agree with you because I'm the eldest. So for my younger siblings, I was their go-to with everything I found out. My parents were not, financially literate in the aspect of FAFSA and going to college in that aspect. So it was more of a can-do on my own while working with the counselors at the time at my high school and then working with financial aid advisors at the school I decided to go to. Now that was just me being proactive, just how I wanted to follow through, but I do kind of want to give that step up for the guidance for students because in our office, the two most related questions I get when I deal with students is one, students are being proactive. They'll apply to many different schools, maybe one for UW school, maybe for Marquette or whatever the case. And it comes in with them saying, the financial package here that I received at Marquette is not similar to what I received at UW La Crosse. Why is that? Instead of going into the implications of explaining every school receives their own financial budget, if you will, that they're able to award students accordingly. The other question I get mostly is when students take out typically the unsub or subsidized loans federally, or even for a Parent Plus loan or a Graduate Plus loan, many parents and students are unaware of the origination or disbursement fees. Because if somebody's going to take out a loan, say for $8,000 for a Parent Plus loan, they don't understand there's about a 4.085%, I believe, origination fee that's removed. So the student is not obviously receiving that full $8,000. The fee is being assessed. Now, personally, I went to DC earlier this year and I lobbied against that, really, to have those origination fees removed. That is just something that I was working on. However, a state cannot supersede what a federal law already states. So while I was looking into other perhaps refinancing options where if the origination fees have to remain, which they do now, it's per federal law from the Department of Education, maybe we could also implement better refinancing options that's kind of going to lessen the burden for students not receiving the full aid that they chose to accept.
I agree. Good point, Connie, too, bringing that up. I'm sorry, I'm Laya Thomas. I'm sitting in for Kiana Jones. But no, a good point. I was thinking that the entire time, Connie. You got to think about the parents, first generation, low income parents. I know I'm the director of WEOP, so the Wisconsin Education Opportunity Programs, and what we do is that we work a lot with the parents with financial literacy, because a lot of times what we get at our office is parents coming in with a package saying, okay, what is this? They sit in on the college orientation meetings, but they don't understand what's going on and they don't have the confidence to ask questions because they don't want to make it seem like they don't know what's really going on. And so we work with the schools and the students to help them really understand the process, because as a first generation student myself too, my parents didn't understand anything about the financial aid process. And so it was really, working with the financial aid office, asking great questions, but a lot of times kids don't have that confidence to ask questions that they don't understand, and they just want to go to college at all costs. And so I agree with financial literacy in high school is important. Also working with the parents to having maybe, financial aid groups for parents at these college orientations, or just specifically for first generation students, understanding the FAFSA. So those are all very important things.
That's great. That's really good information.
I'll even maybe take it on that point a step further. Something that we did here that we found really worked. We had these really big college access nights. We had all these great schools come in. sometimes what we noticed specifically was that our Spanish-speaking families, our largest minority group, our Latino families here, they either A, weren't coming, or B, they would come and would just be checked out. So we made a specific night for the Latino families. It's a lot smaller, and we invited local colleges, as many that would come, with their Spanish-speaking reps who helped give presentations and had their booths. So that was something kind of small that I thought that we did. And again, that takes resources that we had and kind of personnel. So the more that schools, high schools, or any school can do something like that to provide things in the languages that's most spoken in their campus, or in a kind of a culturally contextual way where more families will understand it, I think is very important. So I want to second what everyone's saying. I think it's super important, and the more that parents are involved, the more likely there is to be good decision making, I think, on the behalf of students.
Great. It also, if there are, like, maybe having a way that parents could submit questions during some of these sessions or after that they're afraid to ask in front of a group. I'm sure there are places to do that, but sometimes just mentioning, you know, if you have questions, send them here, and then you'll get 1,000 questions and won't be able to get your other work done, but might help.
Yeah. One more thing I will mention, again, going back to increasing the graduation rate or high-paying job opportunities as well. If we can consider, creating a loan forgiveness program which is tied up to maybe a GPA, and I used as an example of 3.75 out of 4. To me, I think it has a number of advantages. First, there is incentive out there for these guys to study hard. And then that also increases the chances of getting a high-paying job sooner than later. Then we can also ask them, actually, in exchange, to become mentor for others. I see a lot of value in that because they have gone through this process. They did very good in college and all that kind of stuff. And also, they might become a potential source of funding. When they get a good job, they might donate some funds back to what I was talking about, the nonprofit and donations and those kinds of things. So something we might have to consider if something like that can be created.
Does anybody else they want to add? What are we going back into the big group after this?
No, we're going to adjourn within the small group.
All right. Well, I'm not going to make everybody. How long are we supposed to be? I mean, how long is this scheduled for?
Until 1.
I'm not going to make people stay on till 1 o'clock if there isn't any more conversation. But I want to make sure that everybody who has something to offer has an opportunity to do that, either just speak out or enter a message.
Connie, can I make a comment? This is Joan Balwig again. So just to go back to what Masood was just talking about, programs tied to high GPA. And we, of course, have the academic excellence program that is out there that rewards the top students in courses. But I think, going back to the task force that I did with Senator Risser a few years back, I think one of the things that we need to focus on is the students of need. And yes, we do have programs that are tied to academic excellence or loan forgiveness going into particular areas of for medical folks in the medical area, for teachers that are going into high need areas, things like that. I think we need to have the perspective of what is the need. And I think what we've been able to try to increase is support for financial aid in general for students that have that higher financial need. And so I do still believe that that is an area of focus that I would presume the governor and the legislature would be more interested in supporting rather than students of higher academic ability. So just to throw that out there, some perspective on some of those discussions we've had over the years.
That makes sense.
I agree, Joan. I think that's Diane. I totally agree with what you just said. The other one, before we break, I wanted to touch briefly on was the veterans issue that I saw. There's a possible, I don't know, now it just left the screen. I don't know who's in charge of
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Sorry about that. I was like going to read off it and I'm like, well, there it goes. Yeah, create a Veterans Affairs School Certificate official for WDVA. I know there's a veterans position with the university system. But I was curious about that one. Certainly Joan's known that I've had bills for years trying to help veterans with their Wisconsin GI Bill and their post 9/11 benefits. So I'm kind of curious what that would look like. And that might be a lot of the problems that I have when I am arguing about veterans, for veterans, that they get the credits that they've deserved, because sometimes they're not always accredited to them. And as Joe knows, we just passed a bill last session that said that it's up to the veteran if they want those credits, because sometimes then they're over credits. And so that was another thing that I think Tony Kurz brought up, that I wasn't aware that was an issue. So I don't know. I'm interested if people are interested in going down that route.
So when you're talking about credits, what do you mean?
So our military service members often go to other schools, Department of Language, it's in Monterey, California, and they get to be fluent in Farsi. Then they come to Wisconsin, and UW-Platteville does not have a Farsi program, so they don't get Farsi credits. So it's things like that, and then sometimes they deploy off, and they have credits, and they don't always receive them at our public institutions and states. Does that make sense?
So they get credit somewhere else and they're not recognized by the school when they come here?
Correct.
And then it takes more credits for them to graduate?
Correct. So now they can say, and so sometimes those Farsi, every school system does it differently. And not every, well, I'm not sure about right now, but not every school person has somebody that just deals with veteran benefits. The other problem that I've seen is that when veterans are trying to advocate for themselves and they are told no, they often don't push back against that because they believe that's the final word. And so I've often called to try to say, actually, no, they did receive these special benefits and they should be able to be accredited them with their university system.
I had never heard of that. And I will say, anybody who can learn to speak Farsi, I think that's like,
honest to goodness, right? And
right.
But then they would give that. But then sometimes, so they can speak fluent Farsi, but they don't have Farsi at that school, so they don't get those credits. But they could get some general ed credits. And I'm like, well, I think general ed is, I'm just gonna just say is different than like physical education or like an English 101 class, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how every state university handles that is very differently. So I am interested if we had one person that could actually dive into this issue to make it more equitable and fair. I think that would be a good thing.
Are there some campuses that do accept those kind of credits? Or
some do.
Okay.
Some do and some don't. It just matters where you go. There are also some built like some language on the books that if you get this is another one that I was fighting. If you get like I think it's a failing grade, then you no longer get your benefit. But sometimes what's happened is I know a woman who, and I think Joan might remember her story, she had to deploy. So she tried to get out of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in time. She didn't. She just deployed. She was like, forget it. I got to go serve my country. So she did that. She got an F, and then she had to be waitlisted to get back in because she had that bad grade. I mean, it's like all these type of things that happen. And when maybe you're 19, 20 years old, you're not thinking long term about how that's going to affect you. And so that F stayed on her grade. So she was trying to go to UW-Madison, wasn't going to be let in because she had that failing grade because she got deployed and got behind and pulling out of this class. So there's a lot. And then that affected her GI Bill for another year, I think. It was just really unfortunate.
Okay. That sounds very unfortunate.
Yeah, sorry, it's a deep dive into stuff, but
I just want to throw out another idea. Talking to a lot of international students who come to our campus and others, there is a big difference between the amount of tuition fee that they pay. Even other state people come to here pay. There's a big difference between a state and out of a state. And I'm just wondering if this is something we need to consider and make a recommendation. Is that an option? We can make tuition fee pretty much the same whether you're a state or out of a state.
I'm not sure how that would work.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure, but I hear a lot talking to students, so, okay.
And also, not just, I mean, if they're, I don't know, do international students pay more than like someone from Illinois would pay?
I know at UW-Madison that was the case, but it wasn't as large of a difference between, say, in-state versus out-of-state. It was more similar to the out-of-state rate.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, not hearing anybody else or seeing any more messages, I think that we have completed our work for today. I would like to thank all of you and also let you know that if you do come up with other ideas, feel free to email me or send to Kathy or Marco. As we're going through this, this is a lot of information. So please feel free to reach out. And thank you all for participating today. It was very.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Marco. Really
Bye.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Connie.